Welcome back to Talk a Good Game, a show all about, you guessed it, good games. I'm your host, Andrew Wolf. With me today, GameXplain founder, André Segers. André, thanks so much for making this happen. I know we've been trying to get together for a couple months now, and things keep coming up. Nintendo, announcing or finally revealing the Switch 2, I think was the first one, and so I'm glad we were able to get together. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm excited to be here today and chat about not just good games, the best games, obviously.
The best games.
No, I'm kidding. But no, I always love talking about things I'm passionate about. And the games I think we'll be discussing today, I definitely am excited and passionate for. So we're looking forward to it, just because I enjoy, talking about things I like rather than, things I hate constantly.
Yeah. And you've been talking about good games for a long time, right? I mean, GameXplain has been around since like 2014 or something.
20, actually even older. 2010 is
wow.
In fact, we're almost at the 15-year anniversary. March is officially the 15-year anniversary. There's no exact date, like it's kind of hazy when it actually officially started. But I've always treated March 2010 as the official start. Though I have had the GameXplain name for even before that. I used to run a website years before YouTube even existed that no one visited because no one even knew they could watch video online. But
yeah, man, that's crazy. 15 years.
Yeah, I don't know where the time went. It's scary.
How many videos have you published? Do you know?
Oh God, someone just commented on this a couple days ago. I think it's like over 12,000. It might be even more than that.
12,000. That's
it's
crazy.
Obviously not all, or even most were done by me. But over the years we've put a lot of content out there, and it's been it's been a lot.
Well, before we dive into your favorite game of all time, what do you think is your favorite video that you've made for GameXplain?
Oh wow!
I know I didn't prep you for this.
Yeah, I know you didn't. That's a good one. I usually have I've been asked this before. I usually have something off the top of my head, so I'm trying to think real quick. I will say some of the most fun videos I had putting together and creating the entire thing for were my Mario Maker levels. Like for the first Mario Maker on Wii U, I just went crazy making all kinds of like adaptations, if you will, of like other Nintendo games or theme park rides or movies in video game Mario Maker form, which is kind of insane and dumb. But I had a lot of fun trying to figure out how to make often these 3D things in a whole different medium make sense in a 2D Mario environment. And I was pretty happy with how those levels turned out. So I had a lot of fun putting those together. I still look back fondly on my Breath of the Wild analysis, which I spent months on, based on it, one thing we've been known for is making analysis videos where we'll dive into trailers, like pick out all the details and everything about them. And Breath of the Wild was a complete nightmare because at the time when it was really blown out at E3 2016, I think, they had a demo of the game in which, everyone could play, I think like 20-30 minutes of it on the Great Plateau, which, before we fully knew what the Great Plateau was, it felt massive by itself. And so I could look at all the demo stations that people are playing, and everyone's doing something different in that game. Like, this is crazy. So I had to look through practically every person's playthrough of the demo from E3 to consolidate it for my analysis, pointing out like every possible detail we could find on it. It's probably one of the most impressive videos, although I guess looking back, I don't know if it's one of the most fun videos I had making, but I enjoyed the result of all that work.
Doing the work's fun. And Breath of the Wild's crazy. Like thinking back to that E3, man, that trailer where, Link jumps off the horse and is like shooting the bow at the, what was that? The like thing with all the legs.
The Guardian.
Yeah, I'm like, I've got the amiibo above me.
Yeah. I think that may have been the year prior. I could be mixed up a little bit on my years. Because that was our first official look at the game, I believe. And that was mind blowing then. Like seeing, especially at the end where you see the whole like giant world. And the demo that I played that I was talking about E3, a year or two later, really like showed, kind of like encapsulated that feel that trailer had conveyed. It's like, wow, this is a massive world. Even though looking back, we were constrained to a relatively small part of the world being the Great Plateau, but even then it felt completely massive. And then you realize, wow, this is just like one, 15th, if even that, probably even less of the entire world. It was nuts.
Yeah. How long was that video? It must have been long.
God, it was well over an hour. I think it might have been 2 hours.
I've dabbled a little bit in video, like trying to experiment, what works, what doesn't, like talk about eShop sales and stuff. And even like a 5 or 10 minute long video is like as a person that hasn't done video creation, like is a surprising amount of work. It's crazy how much work goes into even 10 minutes. So
it is. Yeah. It's so weird. Sometimes it scales like almost linearly, depending on the type of video. Sometimes, the longer a video, the more complicated it gets. But sometimes some of my most complicated videos have been, on the shorter end, just because I'm trying to do a lot in a short period of time. But I will say, more recently, one of my more recent videos was probably one of the most complex I've made, and one of the longest besides the Zelda one, was I did a deep dive, analysis, review, defense, if you will, of the Mario movie. That ended up being almost as long as the movie itself, just a minute shy. The new movie, not the 93 one, the Super Mario Brothers movie. And yeah, I had a lot of fun putting that together. It was a complete nightmare. I spent months on that thing, and to the point that my video editor could barely handle the project anymore. I'm like, I might have to switch at this point. I'm tired of this thing crashing.
I might have to do a special episode of Talk a Good Movie, of video game movies, and have you back, because how many times did you see the Super Mario movie in theaters? Was it like 30 times or something?
It wasn't quite that.
It was
crazy,
literally
I didn't actually lose track, and I'm not saying that for fun. It was definitely north of 10. I think it was probably around 12 or 13 times that I saw it in the movie theater. And I think it just resonated for me in a way, because I think, for a few reasons, and I won't get into all of them because that'll take forever. But I think, just seeing Mario finally realized on the big screen in a way that I found, faithful to the character while also pushing it farther than the games ever have, far beyond what the games ever have. I thought it just found the perfect middle ground. I know some people pick at the story or nitpick at the story or other elements, but I'm like, for how little they had to work off, really, in terms of character development, and how much they accomplished while still being faithful to everything at the same time, I thought it was just pretty much perfect, and I had a total blast with it. And seeing on the big screen is something that, of course, once the movie leaves theaters, you're not going to be able ever get that feeling again. So I wanted to make sure I, got my fill of it when I had the chance to. So
I'm looking at it. It does give me hope for the Zelda movie. I'm feeling like that could end up pretty good.
I agree, because I'm nervous at the same time for the same reasons I was nervous for the Mario movie. I don't know if I fully trust some of the people over at Sony, not specifically, but, based on some of their output. It's are they capable of this? But then Illumination had the exact same complaints. Do we really want the team behind Minions, Sing and Despicable Me 500 making Mario? And in my opinion, and I know a lot of other Mario fans, not everyone, of course, they thought they really did a great job delivering on it. So hopefully the combination of Nintendo, Sony, and of course, is it Wes Ball, I believe, who produced the recent or directed the recent Planet of the Apes movie, which is fantastic. I thought overall, it really makes me hopeful and excited for the Zelda.
Yeah.
So
I'm looking forward to it. I don't even know when it's coming out. I mean, I've lost track.
They haven't
I don't even know what year it is.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm very curious. What stage of development were they at when they announced the Mario movie? I think it was 2015, 2016. They had just, they were only then exploring how to make it. So if that's the same case for Zelda, it might be years before we see it still. But I'm hoping maybe they had done some things first in this case before announcing it.
And I think they've got to have a Zelda game ready or coming. They're going to line up with it. I think they did with Mario Wonder. And I just think that Nintendo's going to wrap some things up in there.
My personal hope that I've started to latch onto, because it seems very unlikely we'll get a brand new 3D Zelda anytime in the next 2 years. So unless the Zelda, just because Tears of the Kingdom just came out, and that took 6 years by itself after Breath of the Wild. So unless the movie is even farther off than I think, I'm personally hoping that they are, even though this kind of goes against, I'm generally anti remake and remasters, just because I feel like those efforts would be better spent on other things. But new games, I mean. But I would make an exception for a complete remake or reimagining of Ocarina of Time. And if they pair that with if that's what they pair with the Zelda movie, that could be amazing. Especially as I would imagine they're going to be pulling a fair amount of inspiration from Ocarina of Time. So even if it's not the same exact story, that could be a really strong pairing, I think. And I would kill to see Ocarina of Time in the visuals or in the style of that Wii U demo that they had of Zelda, that never ended up becoming a game. I would love to see that.
I actually recorded an episode of Talk a Good Game with Jason at Nintendo Wire, and his favorite game of all time was Ocarina of Time. And he was talking about how it's it hasn't aged super well. And if you didn't play it originally, it's kind of hard to go back and play. And he was also saying I think that a remaster of Ocarina of Time to line up with this Zelda movie would be perfect. And fix some quality of life stuff and really just make it a little bit more modern, but still keep Ocarina of Time. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I think that'd be really fun. I think one small thing that stood out to me when I was replaying it for its 25th or 30th anniversary. I don't know. I'm always bad with math and years. We're somewhat recent anniversary it had a few years ago. I remember playing through the second dungeon, the Dodongo dungeon, I think, or whatever. And I remember like I was in a room with torches I had to light, and you know, there's only like a specific way you can light them, like using your Deku stick maybe or something. I can't quite remember. But I'm like, I'm in a room with fire-breathing creatures. Why can't they light these sticks on fire? If this were Breath in the Wild, or torches, if this were Breath of the Wild, they would have been able to, you know?
Exactly.
I think they could probably marry some mechanics from the newer games with the, you know, the world of Ocarina of Time. And that could be a really interesting mixture where you get like a bit more of an open world feel, but like still constrained with a lock and key approach that, you know, Zelda's typically had before Breath of the Wild. I think that could be a really strong, I mean, for one, game, period, but also a test bed for future games too, because for as much as I like Breath of the Wild and lesser Tears of the Kingdom, I think I like a lot of what both of those games did, but I think there's still a lot they could do with elements of that within the framework of a more conventional Zelda. And I think they haven't quite hit on that yet. So I'm hoping maybe that's what the third game is, coming. Possibly after my Ocarina of Time remake.
And I also want Wind Waker, although I mean, like, I feel like we need it, but I don't know.
Where is Wind Waker HD?
I think it's going to be launch window for Switch 2 is my hope. Like, I mean, the rumors been swirling that those games, the remakes, have been ready for years. Right. So I think they're just sitting on them for the right time.
I mean, it makes sense because they could literally just port the Wii U version and it'd be totally fine.
It looks
great, and it didn't even need the gamepad to be played, though it was better with it. But you didn't. I
personally feel like the gamepad made every game better. Like I don't know, people shit on the Wii U all the time, and it wasn't great. The name was confusing. There's a lot of things you can complain, rightfully so, about the Wii U, but I love the gamepad. I mean, we started this conversation with Super Mario Maker. I had a hard time playing Super Mario Maker 2 because I don't have the gamepad.
Was it
hurt my wrists. It was hard to do. So I'm thinking with the Switch 2 mouse, the Joy-Con mouse, like I'm here for Super Mario Maker 3. I'm ready. So
yes, same here. I'm actually really excited for the mouse. Like the thing I was a bit disappointed toward the Switch 2 wasn't that everything had, you know, most everything had leaked, including the mouse feature even. But it was more just that, you know, people were like, you're only disappointed because initially because we knew what it was. I'm like, well, no, what it was is just what the Switch was basically. But you know, then they confirmed the rumored Switch feature. It's seemingly confirmed by showing off the Joy-Cons being used as a mouse. I'm like, yes, that's a new thing I was hoping for. Like that could be really exciting and fun, and it could really help like marry the gap or reduce the gap that we've lost by losing the second screen by giving us a really accurate pointer that could bring back like some of my favorite elements of the Wii U, like, you know, as you mentioned, using as a pointer in Mario Maker, because that was just so perfect. Yeah,
and there is part of me that hopes that there's some way to cast, like I can use the Switch 2 as a second screen, but I can cast like the primary screen to the dock. I don't know that that's ever going to happen. You know, early with the C button, I was like, ooh, maybe it's a cast button. And it seems like it's more likely to be some community thing, but I don't know.
Have you seen the mock-ups done by, I think it's Jarred Dog on Reddit? They've been spread on Twitter too now, where their idea is that the USB port on top can be used for a second screen. You just plug a second screen right into the Switch 2.
I saw the patent or whatever that came out, and it was like a second screen looking thing, but yeah, I don't know if that's going to happen. Fun fact, though, it looks like today is the 39th anniversary of the Legend of Zelda series, which, congratulations, Legend of Zelda. That's maybe it was yesterday, but long time, man, almost 40 years.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And yesterday was the 32nd anniversary of Star Fox. So a lot of anniversaries happening recently.
A lot of February.
That's awesome. Yeah, good timing with Zelda, though. So, although it's making me feel even older than I already am, having to celebrate my 40th.
Happy birthday.
Like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
But you're not old enough to have seen your favorite games of all time at E3, I don't think.
That's right. Although I did go to E3. I started going when I was technically underage, like 18 was the cutoff, but there were a lot more loose back in the day. So I was going to E3 when I was 16.
Man, early days E3 going underage, that must have been a little crazy, but
it was wild because there was even a time where we went into like a kind of like a booth, but it was off in a side hallway, not on the main show floor, and they're just handing out beers to whoever came in, and I'm like, I'll take one, sure. No one's checking that.
No wonder E3's gone. Rest in peace. Hey, your favorite games of all time, and we were talking about this before we started recording, of like, should I make you pick one? And I have a hard time making anybody pick one favorite game of all time, but you've got Super Mario Galaxy 2 and Mario 64 here. Why are they your favorite games of all time?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess first off, here's why I had to choose two, because I feel like one, your reasoning could change day to day or whatever, but in my specific case, it's because Mario 64 made such an impact on me when it released, like to a degree that I don't think we will ever see in gaming again. At least I don't think I'll ever experience myself in gaming again. I don't think I'm alone in that.
Hmm.
Like it's probably a combination of factors, like just how big of a jump it was from 2D to 3D. The era in which it came out in, and my age probably too, being I think 11 at that time. Like it just all came together like perfectly, where it just felt like the most mind blowing experience I could have possibly had. And I don't think we'll see anything like that again. Whether or not you think it's aged, poorly or well or somewhere in between, like it doesn't really even matter. Like all I know is that it's unlikely I'll ever experience anything quite like that
Yeah,
again.
and by that you
And
mean like it just groundbreakingness of it.
everything felt new
Yeah.
about that game. Like it showed me what was possible in this new medium of 3D. I mean, of course, 3D had been dabbled with before, including on Nintendo games. We had Star Fox, or to a degree you could count A Link to the Past, with it being top down and being able to move in any direction. Not true 3D, of course. Doom, tons of examples. Mario 64 was the first game to really show what you can do with having a proper physical 3D world. In my opinion, at least, the first game that I played that really showed what you could do. Like I remember like climbing a tree so a Goomba couldn't get me, and even small things like that blew my freaking mind. Or the bomb battlefield feels quaint now. At that time, that felt like practically Breath of the Wild, where you could like run up an entire freaking mountain in the distance. The camera zoomed out, you could see the entire world around you, including like little enemies moving down below, and that was just freaking wild to me. Like having full control in every dimension, being able to like jump or ground pound or fly, being able to interact with things in a multitude of ways. Like Mario 64, I'm pretty sure still has the biggest moveset of any 3D Mario game yet, and possibly ever will, because there were moves in there that you didn't even need, really. And it was just fun to do them, and it offered a level of freedom that we honestly hadn't even really seen since until Mario Odyssey, I would say, because even Mario Sunshine kind of took a step back in some ways, because Mario 64 did this cool thing where it wasn't like even linear. Like you were in these worlds, you could grab stars in almost any order, and that kind of also blew open the doors for what again, what I thought was even possible. Like you weren't just going level to level to level. It was like you can go into these worlds and fully explore them and do whatever you want. And yeah, it just resonated with me in a way that nothing else has since. And and that's not even to mention the presentation. Like hearing Mario talk for the first time, hearing him, greet you on the title screen with that like giant, round bubbly face of his, and hearing Charles Martinet's voice work, and having Mario and Peach interact with each other in proper 3D. Like it was all just so mind blowing to a degree I can't even explain it. Like I'm trying to right now, but there's nothing I can say that I can put into words the way I felt. And even now, like it's hard for me to even fully remember how I felt then, but every now and then I'll get like a little glimmer, like a little like glimpse of like a little like throwback to how I felt then. I'm like, oh my God, that's how can I encapsulate this feeling? It's so amazing,
Yeah, and it's hard to explain to people that weren't alive or like didn't experience it. Like I personally didn't play it, but I watched like a complete playthrough because I was a little bit young. It's hard to explain. In 1996, Mario 64 was insane. Like, if I think back to it, it feels more like a 2001-ish level of like game quality and graphics. Like it feels, 5 years in that time, the difference in technology and the difference in things that people were making is crazy. So the fact that it came out in 1996 is mind blowing. And like you said, it's hard to explain like what really that feeling is. And I think the closest that I have felt to like similar experiences recently, I think, is Astrobot. And I know that a lot of people have been making that comparison, and it's an easy comparison to make, but it was really just like, wow, it was similar to the Breath of the Wild. They were like, can I do this thing? Like, yes, you can do that thing. And it was just a ton of fun, pure fun. And I think that's where Mario 64 is too.
And that's actually maybe a good segue into the other half of my favorite games that I may end up hopping between these two, so I don't know how this is going to go. But yeah, Mario 64, because I just cannot ever separate its impact from anything else. Even revisiting that game, like I still have fun with it. But obviously, it was as one of the first 3D games. It doesn't hold up perfectly, though. I think some people are way harsher on it than it should be. However, when it comes to just pure fun these days, Astrobot, of course, is fantastic. I loved. It felt like it really encapsulated that Nintendo spirit, even to a degree, borrowing a fair amount of ideas from some Mario games, but doing it in a way that still felt, fresh and new. But for me, when it comes to Mario and any game, the game I find myself going back to the most these days for Mario, which is my favorite series of all time, is Super Mario Galaxy 2. Like, I feel like this is almost like the pinnacle of Mario, in terms of like just a kind of gameplay feel, because it kind of goes bananas, if you will, like its level design, where Mario, it's the thing with Mario games, right? The levels like rarely have really been coherent. There's platforms just for the sake of having platforms, things float in the air for no discernible reason. And that's part of the reason why I like Tropical Freeze, because everything has a reason for why it is. But for Mario, it's never really been a thing, which is fine. And Mario Galaxy 2, though, let me backtrack. Mario Galaxy kind of took that general idea, put it into space, which kind of contextualized why all these platforms are floating. And I thought that game was amazing as well. Like, that game blew my mind with this anti-gravity stuff or being able to run around planets or whatever. But it still felt like it was a little bit cohesive with the space theme, which is fine. I loved it. But then Mario Galaxy 2 is like, who cares if anything makes sense? Let's just go balls to the wall with the level design here. And, to the point that even space is kind of, the space theme in the game is even kind of like downplayed compared to the previous game. And I just find that game is just such a joy to go to return to. And whenever I have had to go back to it for like a video or like, going back to for this very discussion we're having, just to remind myself of a few things, I get sucked into it. Like, I don't want to stop playing because it's just so addictive. Like, I love how Mario feels in the game. I love the level themes, the music. Yoshi in the game is so freaking fun. I still think one of the best uses of the Wii pointer we've ever seen in a game, or of any pointer in a game, really, where you can use his tongue, by pointing to like target enemies or grab platforms and fling from them. It just lent a really almost just a really kind of loose feel to the game in the best way possible. And I just have so much fun going back to that game.
Yeah,
so even though Mario,
the Super Mario Galaxy games are different than basically like every other Mario game, right? Like you can talk a little bit about like what are they like at the base level?
Yeah, good one. Right. So Mario Galaxy is basically kind of Mario in space, where the platforms are just kind of like floating there oftentimes. And even if the level theme is in space, things are just floating for no reason. And you hop between levels and you grab stars. Stars basically replace the flagpoles at the end of the classic Mario games. And the more stars you get, the more levels you unlock, of course. And it's just like kind of like 3D platforming perfection in my mind, where it just takes, an established formula that at that point we'd known for 30 years probably, if not, around there. And just kind of like showed we could do with like the kind of like 2D style of gameplay where it's still linear, but in a 3D space where it can, hop around anywhere, but also like what the gravity mechanics, you can like run around planets. Or one of my favorite things to do is you can get caught between the gravity of like competing platforms, and you can like kind of like fly yourself between them almost perpetually. Yeah. And that's just a lot of fun. And that's actually one of my favorite things about the game too, is just for me, one of the most important things about any game is just the core game feel. Is it fun to control the character? And this is something Mario often excels at, period. But I think, again, Mario Galaxy 2 might be one of those best examples of it, where it is just fun to jump around and bounce around or grab Yoshi or stop enemies. Just everything feels really good about that game.
It's crazy that they made gravity for the game. Like, it's really impressive. It's not just, gravity's pulling down or like pushing down. It's not just one direction. Like, it's when you're running around planets, it's gravity.
Yeah, it's gravity. Yeah, it feels so good. I think one guy apparently programmed the gravity engine for that game. So my hat's off to him, because it adds so much to it. And I feel like there's so much in which they can still explore in that space, so to speak, that I would love to see them make, a third game in the series. And, whether or not that ends up being the next Mario, I don't know. But yeah, it's just such a fun mechanic that there's countless ways in which they use it too. Like, every level feels like it's doing something new and different. So it never feels repetitive or boring. Like, it never has a chance to get boring, because it's always doing something new, including even having one of the levels be a throwback to my other favorite game, being Mario 64. It's literally called Throwback Galaxy, which is a remake of Thwomp's Fortress, which is the second level from Super Mario 64, which is a really fun way to kind of like connect these worlds, especially because that level, it acts as a sequel almost, if you will, to the original, where like time has passed and a few things have changed since then. And in a series that really doesn't care about story or canon at all, that was kind of fun, you know?
Nice little throwback. Yeah. Do you feel like, so in, what was it, 2020, Nintendo released the Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection, which had Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, and Super Mario Galaxy, the first one. Do you see Nintendo releasing a Super Mario 3D All-Stars 2 or a different collection that includes Super Mario Galaxy 2? Or do you think it's going to be like a solo release? Or are we going to get a port of it?
That's a good one. Yeah, I really don't know. I don't. It's hard to envision them doing another 3D All Stars collection, as popular as it was, despite it being a limited time release. I'm not. I don't quite see it. I mean, and not having Mario Galaxy 2 on there was already a kind of a weird oversight. I mean, not. They didn't do it by accident. It was obviously purposeful for some reason, possibly because of the need for a better pointer than the gyro controls can provide. I at this point, I am kind of expecting it to be a standalone release. Perhaps most likely in the form of a proper remaster. With maybe upgraded elements, upgraded textures, but still the same core game. If it's anything more than that, that'd be fine too. Though, as I kind of alluded to before, I'm generally not a huge fan of like those remakes, because especially in the case of Mario Galaxy 2 or Mario games in general, they still look really good. I think they still hold up. You just upgrade a few of those textures, I think it's going to be totally fine. Mario Galaxy already looked great in the 3D All-Stars collection. They barely touched that version at all, and so whatever form it takes, I'll be there for it, because I just love this game so much. I want to play more of it, especially, at a resolution higher than 480p.
Yeah, that would be nice. What was the Super Mario Sunshine was good too, and I'm glad that they had Super Mario 64 on there, but I think I think just like a straight port, I don't remember if they even did anything for the Super Mario 3D All-Stars, or if they were just like emulated.
So it's a weird case, because it is, as far as I'm aware, they are emulated, at least the latter two games, I think, or two of them are, I forget. One of them, Mario Galaxy, may be more of a port. I can't quite remember. In any case, at least two of them were emulated, I believe. But they did something interesting where there's they added another middle layer where, as the emulator is running, this middle layer is adding new things on the fly, like swapping out textures, for instance. So there were a few enhancements to at least Mario 64 and Sunshine, I believe, and maybe Galaxy 2, where they upgraded some of the textures. I think Mario 64 is most notable with things like, I think maybe the coins, maybe the trees, especially in the lava level. There's a platform with a Bowser sliding puzzle type thing almost, and that looks much higher resolution now than it did back in the day. And they did it for, as kind of unambitious, that is. It still did a pretty good job, I think, of making it still feel like it was the same game on 64. It effectively was. But the upgrades didn't stand out, is more my point, which I think worked. They upgraded the parts that were probably the most obvious, that were obviously dated, like the HUD, for instance, but the rest, still looks like the 64 game.
Yeah, and I picked up a 360 recently, an Xbox 360, and was playing a couple of games, and I think the Wii games and Xbox 360, that sort of late 2000s generation, those games look really good still. They still look great. I think there are some load times and some things that 2025 has sort of gotten rid of that. We rarely have load times or anything like that now. But man, those games still look great.
I agree. And I kind of feel like starting, for me at least, starting with the GameCube era, that's the first time where I really felt like that for one, that the visuals kind of match the box art, it doesn't feel like a whole different game than what the box advertised. And going back to it now, I'm like, man, these games still look good. Maybe it's just my nostalgia speaking, the fact I grew up with these games, but I go back to them and it's not much of an adjustment. They still look really good in many cases. Obviously there are exceptions as well, but if you're talking about the AAA games at the time, Wind Waker, for instance, Mario Sunshine, F-Zero GX, all these look fantastic still to this day, to the point that, as we've already seen a few examples of, such as most recently with Donkey Kong Country Returns, which is technically a Wii game but still using GameCube hardware effectively. They still look pretty darn good with minimal enhancements, So
do you think? So every time I post about Super Mario Odyssey, it's become a running joke now where I put Super Mario Odyssey 1, and I get a bunch of replies like, what the hell do you mean? You know, like what Super Odyssey 1? What do you mean 1? Is there a 2? And it's kind of a running joke. I don't have any insight into like what Nintendo is working on if a Super Mario Odyssey 2 is coming, but what do you think? Do you think we're going to get just a totally brand new, different 3D Mario game, or are they going to do another Super Mario Odyssey? What do you think?
Obviously, anything is possible,
Definitely,
and with
yeah.
Nintendo, you never truly know. I feel like though, were there to be an Odyssey 2 as their next game, I think we would have seen it already.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would. For me, I feel like it might not be as exciting as launching with something either a sequel to another one of the Mario spin-off series, not spin-offs, but you know what I mean, another one of the Mario mainline branches,
Super
like
Mario Galaxy 3 or something.
yeah. Or something entirely new, you know. Don't get me wrong, I would be very happy with an Odyssey 2. I loved Odyssey 1, had a ton of fun with it. I mean, it was one of my favorite games on the Switch, period.
Definitely.
So I don't want to take anything away from it. But at this time, you know, and especially there's something, I don't know, I almost feel like Nintendo's changed a bit since the time of Odyssey. Some ways in the better, some ways in the worse. But I feel like with now the Mario movie being a massive success and kind of like them kind of like finally figuring out like what the Mushroom Kingdom like kind of truly is, you know, but it always changes game to game, and I don't expect them to even stick with that version of it outside of the movies. But I feel like they may have a better idea of where they want to take the series now. And when I look back at Odyssey, it's kind of a weird game, right? You're like basically body napping all these like poor defenseless creatures, right? And it's kind of weird and kind of creepy.
Except for the dinosaur.
I still think it's fun. I like it. But
the dinosaurs,
it's like, do they want
okay to take over?
Yeah, exactly. But it's like, do they want to go back to that concept right now? I think we may. Yeah. So I'm kind of thinking of the next 3D Mario maybe a little bit more conventional in the sense that it's, you know, less weird and to that degree at least. But I still think it's going to be, you know, my hope is that it's something like either one, the successor to Mario Galaxy, or two, to something kind of like entirely new we haven't seen in that space, in the Mario space. Whether it's, you know, a truly fully open world 3D or 3D Mario. Which Bowser's Fury kind of started exploring a little bit recently on Switch, which was a secondary game that they added onto a port of Super Mario 3D World for the Switch. So it was a shorter type of experience, but kind of teased a possible future. Or is it something that we can't even think of? Yeah. You know, that's when Nintendo's at their best, you know? And they do such a great job of... It's so interesting, real quick, not to go off on too much of a tangent.
Do it.
Like comparing... Perfect. I feel like, and I don't want to bash the Sonic games too much, or even at all, because, you know, that community's been through enough, you know, and I like a lot, you know, I still like a fair amount of those games, but I feel like it's interesting looking at Sonic, which also tries to do something new with, I feel like, every 3D game, but Mario does as well. And just when it comes to consistency, Mario's just kind of figured it out. Like they figured out like at a baseline what Mario is, then they iterate on that to make something that still feels new while being recognizable. And Sonic is obviously still recognizable too, but there's just something that it just lacks a certain consistency between the 3D games, which makes it so like it always feels like a roll of the dice. Like, am I going to like this one or not? Whereas with 3D Mario, it's pretty consistent. You know, like by and large, I think if you like 3D Mario, you're probably going to like most of those games. And I don't quite understand why that difference exists. You know, maybe Sonic is just fundamentally different that they can't replicate it to that degree. I don't know.
The problem,
but I think.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think, you know, Nintendo deserves credit for figuring out what, you know, that is for Mario that works, and then finding ways to make that feel new. But please,
I feel like the problem that I see with Sonic is that Sonic's thing, is going fast, and like that worked really, and that was really cool, and that worked really well. You know, like Sega Genesis, like early in the '90s, that worked really well. That was a really cool shtick. That was a cool thing to do. And I just don't feel like it translates super well. And I know people really love the open world, the big Sonic games that came out recently. But I feel like Mario, because Mario's not like backed into a corner, like Mario's able to do so much more. Where I feel like Sonic is kind of tied to, you have to go fast and you have to build around going fast. And I think that really limits the possibilities.
I think that's actually a really good point. I think that is part of it. Like, that's going fast is Sonic's identity, whereas jumping is just a part of Mario, you know? And I think jumping also gives you more freedom in which you can explore it rather than, you know, going fast, especially in a 3D environment. Because, you know, one thing I think we've heard is just, you know, with building Sonic levels, they have to be massive. They need to account for the huge amount of speed he has, especially with the boost formula. We can just go top speed at basically the drop of a hat, which is why I feel like they kind of started figuring out maybe a new direction with Sonic Frontiers, which I know is, every 3D Sonic game is divisive to some degree. For myself, though, I think they kind of start figuring it out. I'm like, this game's actually really fun. Not perfect not perfect, of course, but I thought I really enjoyed what they were doing there, And I still think there's space in which they can, a lot of space that they could explore Sonic in 3D, a lot of frontiers. But I think one idea, I personally think would be fun to explore is play more into that speed element, in that maybe Sonic doesn't go fast all the time. Like, for instance, if they took a more Breath of the Wild approach, I thought what would be interesting is make like how you can upgrade Link's stamina in that game. That's what enhanced your ability to explore. Do the same for Sonic, where he starts off kind of slow weak. And plodding. Yeah. And he slowly gets speed over time, and that lets you climb like higher structures, reach islands in the sky by flying into it, by lifting off a platform or something, flying
getting
off
tails and floating with tail. Instead of the holding something over your head and flying down like Zelda, you've got tails.
Exactly. Bingo. That'd be perfect. Right.
Yeah, ship it.
And that might just, I think one, that could be really rewarding as a player, but two, from a gameplay development too, I think it makes sense for them, like, oh, we could finally make, more constrained environments, that you kind of slowly unlock over time, almost a little Metroidvania like. Not quite, like that's kind of overselling the idea, but I think open world that slowly broadens as you get more speed, I think could be really interesting.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. But speaking of going fast, a game that you love right now that you feel is underrated, and I see you talk about F-Zero 99 all the time. And this is finally one that I've actually played. I would say that I'm better at Tetris 99. Like I feel like I can finish in the top 10 or top 5 like pretty regularly in Tetris 99.
That's impressive.
F-Zero 99, yeah. I'm finishing in like 80th. Like I'm getting knocked out early. I'm real bad at F-Zero 99. You're not. I want to. So it's the basic idea is that it's F-Zero, but there's 99 players, right? And then players get knocked out somehow throughout the race.
Yeah, so it's right. It's F-Zero from the Super Nintendo, but now on Switch, looking much exactly the same. But now the main thing is it's a massive multiplayer online game, essentially. There are 99 players per race, so really no CPUs unless you need to fill in for human players, which does happen. Anyways, and it's basically a battle royale where you're trying to survive to the end, and then of course it's a race. So whoever gets first, wins, and then everyone else is winning or losing to lesser degrees. And I find it just so freaking thrilling. Like, I feel like a lot of people are like, I'm waiting for a true F-Zero game. Like, this is a true F-Zero game. Yeah, it looks like a 16-bit game, but I personally quite like the art style. And I think it really works for what this game is. And I think part of why I find it underrated is because I don't think it gets enough attention for how well it works. Where to what you're saying, like I'm okay at the game. Like, I'm not amazing. I do pretty well when I'm not blowing up. The thing is, like, I like to flirt on that line of disaster, on the edge of on the precipice of disaster. So I often am blowing up as much as I'm winning. But when I'm winning, I tend to do okay. Like I'm in the higher ranks. Anyways, though, I these days I rarely win first. Like, the people playing this game now are so freaking good that it's a rare day that I'm actually getting first place. But more to my point, what I think this game does so well is just that the game feel, or game essence, as Sakurai likes to call it, where like almost moment to moment you're constantly making decisions, because there's this risk versus reward balance, and it ties into what I was just saying, actually, because part of the brilliance of F-Zero, ironically not in the Super NES game, it's actually a mechanic that was introduced in X and has carried through with the series since then, including now 99, is that your health meter is your boost meter. So when you're boosting, you're losing health, meaning you're at a greater risk of blowing up and dying. And especially in this game, that from other racers actively taking you out, because they get bonuses for it too. And that's such a good like mechanic for your gameplay, because every moment is a decision. It's like, am I going to risk boosting one more time, or am I going to blow up doing that? And is it better to maybe get 15th, 20th, or 25th place, or even lower, rather than blowing up, especially in a Grand Prix, where if you blow up once, you're out of the game, you're out of the races, it's game over for you. And that at its core is so fun, especially again now that we have this massive scale of 99 racers. But then they do something really cool with I forget the Skyway is what they call it, because I think what they did smartly is it's not purely a skill based game, but it largely still is. But one of the complaints people have about Mario Kart is it's sometimes too random, right? Like, you're at the mercy of the iron boxes. If you're in 8th place or lower, it's sometimes an advantage, but you'll get a bullet bill that shoots you right into first, and it doesn't, and for everyone else, that kind of sucks. It doesn't feel rewarding to be shot by a bullet passing you by that takes your, first place or whatever. And second, even for the player who gets a bullet bill, it doesn't feel that great either. Like, you're winning through no skill of your own. So I think F099 found a really smart way of going about this and kind of rebalancing the game on the fly by having what they call the Skyway, which is effectively a second racetrack on top that has no hazards on it. It has boost pads constantly, so you go faster. So you're avoiding hazards, you're avoiding other racers. It gives you shortcuts because it cuts through like tight corners on the track, and then eventually it'll drop you back off. But the only, onto the main track. But the only way to access the Skyway is by grabbing energy dropped by other racers on the track when they like ram into each other or whatever else. Meaning it's inherently balanced by the further back you are, the more energy you're going to get because there's more racers up front slamming around into each other. Meaning if you're in first, you're not going to be getting any energy because no one's dropping any. Whereas people in the back, there's tons of energy for them to grab. That boosts them into the Skyway, which you're still racing. You just don't turn off your brain. Like you still need to race when you're on the Skyway in order to hit those boost pads, make those corners tighter, and then when it drops you back into the race, or even just timing the Skyway is part of the skill of using it. So it's not an instant win button. And I think it's just a smart way of keeping people who otherwise would be left out of the game back into the action. Because again, it's not a push to win button. It's still, you need to activate it at the right time. You need to take advantage of it. And even the act of getting to the Skyway still takes skill too. Like, it's getting the energy isn't always free. Like, you still have to steer for it, aim for it, make sure you're collecting it. And I just find it's a smart balance of all these systems that just feel so good in the end that for me, it's probably one of my favorite racing games I've ever played, especially online. It just has such a great game feel that I think it doesn't get enough credit for, especially with it being like effectively a free game on Switch online. Like, why isn't everyone playing this game?
Do you feel like it's
so fun?
Do you feel like it's the graphics? Do you feel like it's because it looks like a Super Nintendo game?
That's honestly, that probably is part of it. That might be part of it. I don't know if it's the key reason. And to be fair, I don't know how successful this game really is or isn't. I go online and at the minimum, there's always at least 20 people racing, like even midday. Though, and that's even with like how quick the lobbies are. Like you never wait more than 30 seconds for a race. But anyways, I do think that the graphics may be part of it, but at the same time too, I think the graphics may have been essential because I don't think Nintendo would have taken this risk perhaps of making a massively online multiplayer F-Zero racing game, especially for free, had it required, full 3D visuals, everything being 3D physically modeled. Like, that would have been astronomical for the budget. Not to say I wouldn't want it, of course, but I don't think Nintendo would have taken that risk. And I think and I wish more people would maybe overlook that if that is part of the reason why, and just give it a shot. Because I feel like, maybe I can only speak from my experience, but as one who doesn't even come close to consistently winning races these days. I mean, by definition, most people aren't going to be winning races just because only one person can truly be the winner. I still find it fun, even moment to moment. Like, whether or not I'm winning, losing, or blowing up, it's fun all the way, especially because another smart thing this game does is it always finds you 4 other rivals, and they're always around your skill level or your rank in the Grand Prix. And so, like, that's another, like, kind of meta objective you have, is to beat these other racers. Or even if you're not winning first, it still feels good to beat those people, and again, just another smart layer onto this game. So if you've not played it, or if you think it looks bad, give it a shot at least, especially if you have Switch Online already. You have nothing to lose. It's free. Please play it.
No, and it's even like you were saying, like, even not being super good at it, it's still fun. And I felt that way with Tetris 99 a little bit, though I did feel like sometimes you get piled on and then it's like totally dead super fast. But I think it can be fun even if you're not super good. And I like that about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, because there's always it never feels like you're fully out of the race unless you're totally dead. And I love that feel. And it is kind of similar to Tetris 99 in that respect, where it never quite feels like you're out, until you are.
So did you play F-Zero, what was it, on the Super Nintendo?
Yeah, I got for my 6th birthday or something. Yeah, 7th maybe. Somewhere around
so
there.
Do you feel like that's part of why you love F-Zero 99 so much?
It could absolutely be part of it. Like, I've always been a fan of the original and the series, and even though the new game doesn't perfectly recreate the feel by design, I think it feels even better. like it obviously is very reminiscent and based on the original. So that could be part of it. But to be honest, I don't play the original F-Zero all that much these days.
Yeah.
So it's like, it was a lot of fun in its time. Doesn't hold up especially well, especially with the games since. It's not a bad game by any stretch. I still think it's fun and good.
But
it's a game I
F-Zero better.
Exactly. I wouldn't have
Right.
gone back to it. But now that 99 brought it back and showed how you can evolve that formula, I'm like, this is genius.
Yeah.
And it's basically like the first Nintendo game we've seen like this. Like this is really a Nintendo battle royale.
Yeah.
And even Tetris 99, which is probably the closest thing that they had since, still feels different because everyone's operating in their own isolated space, right? It's only the only way you interact with each other is by like getting a combo and sending garbage their way. But F-Zero, you're all in the same physical 3D space. And that's really fun. So it's kind of a first for Nintendo with that many players all at once, like interacting together. It's wild. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And it makes me excited for what they could be doing next, if they may explore more games along that line.
Yeah, it feels like they were sort of testing the waters. And then late last year when they had that network test for that weird random Minecraft block building base game, that whatever that was, where people were like, I have to sign an NDA to play this. Like, it feels like they're like, okay, let's test the servers. Let's test, like, this battle royale thing seems to work pretty well. So I'm curious to see what they're working on. And another game that you love right now that you feel like it was made just for you, which is maybe like the same question as the last one, because it seems like F-Zero 99 was also made for you. But speaking of like multiplayer games, Dead by Daylight. Now, I haven't played Dead by Daylight. Can you explain? It's also a multiplayer like experience?
Yeah.
Or?
So it's for one, it's a game I never thought I would get into, which is hilarious considering this question. I'll explain how this makes sense later. But it's an asymmetrical online 4 versus 1 game. It's horror themed, meaning you have 1 killer versus 4 survivors. The killer's goal is to kill all the survivors before they escape. The survivors have to work together as a team in order to activate generators, turn on 5 generators to power the gates, which is how you actually exit the stage and win. So it's effectively a race against time, because if you take too long activating the generators, you're probably going to get killed by the killer. But what makes it really fun is just how those two elements interplay, or play off each other, because it kind of feels like a game of hide and seek combined with tag, which as a kid is like some of the most fun you could have. That's right?
Perfect.
And they found a way to like make that, encapsulate that into a game feel, and it has this awesome horror theme, because basically, when the killer comes to find you, like you can try to hide from him initially, though he has a lot of tools he can use to suss out where you are in the game called perks. But once he finds you, well, then the race is on. Like, he's trying to get you down, you're trying to run away. You can vault over obstacles, you can parkour your way around, basically, not too extreme like, but you can try to lose him in a maze of walls, for instance. Whereas as a killer, you're trying to find this guy, you're trying to hunt him down. And in this game in particular, since the game launched, they now have a crazy amount of killers. I think it started with 5. They have like over 30 now, I believe. Every killer is entirely different. They all have their own unique skills and attacks. And so so for the killer, like, you have a lot of options to who you want to play as, who you want to get better at. Some may fit your play style, some may not. Like, one is a spirit that can turn invisible and fly through walls. Another guy has a harpoon that can, he can shoot survivors with and like reel them in. There's another guy that can turn invisible to, sneak up on you without you even realizing it. There's crossover characters from movies. They have Ghostface from the Scream movies who can stalk you from a distance. Michael Myers is a little similar in that respect. And tons of others. The alien from, Alien is there. And it's just, I find it so thrilling and fun. Like, it gives me like an adrenaline rush like not many games had before. And what's interesting is, this is the type of game, as I said, I never thought I would get into, because it's an online focused game. I've often tended to be more, maybe not entirely single player focused, but games that had a single player, I would then play the multiplayer with online, like Mario Kart, for instance. And it's it didn't seem like it'd be up my alley at all. It'd been out for 5 years by the time I started playing it a couple of years ago. And since then, I've sunk a couple, almost 2,000 hours into this game.
Wow.
And I've tried to figure out, like, what is it about this game that really appealed to me? Because again, it didn't seem like something I'd be interested in on the surface. And I think there's a couple of reasons why I think I got into it. Number one is, a couple of years ago, I was kind of like just burning out on games in general. There wasn't a whole lot happening that I found interesting, whether on Switch or any other platform. Just not a whole lot that was engaging me. So I was a little bit more open to trying other things, I think, just to find something outside, my wheelhouse typically. But 2 is, looking back, I realized, wait a second, there's another game like Dead by Daylight that I had a ton of fun with before that I never even realized was very similar in concept, being Luigi's Ghost Mansion in Nintendo Land on the Wii U. This is a game that launched with the Wii U that was meant to really showcase the gamepad, and more specifically, how the gamepad could be used for asymmetric gameplay experiences. It's easy to forget now. Nintendo made a big deal about that early on, which they kind of almost entirely forgot about since then. And I don't, even since that game, I don't think they really dabbled in any other really asymmetrical games outside of maybe WarioWare or Game & Wario. And I feel like that was such a missed opportunity, because especially now looking back, I'm like, I'm having so much fun in Dead by Daylight, because I really like having that asymmetric viewpoint. Because in Luigi's Ghost Mansion, it was 1 ghost versus 4 survivors. Very similar idea, except in that case, the survivors, the Luigi's could fight back by using their flashlights. It's a little bit like Ghostbusters in that sense. But otherwise, kind of like similar at the base level. And I think there's a lot of fun to be had in that asymmetrical style of gameplay, because it's almost 2 games in one. The killer's playing almost an entirely different game from the survivors. And it's really fun to see how those 2 systems collide, and how you have to play off of them, and how you have to play in a whole different way in order to complete your objective, depending on which side you're on. And it now makes me long for a time, or in which there's even more games like that. Although as we were touching on before here, Andrew, you were saying that you were looking into Dead by Daylight, and you're like, well, there's quite a few games like this, right? Were you saying something to that?
I couldn't remember if I'd played it or not. I know that, and I was just looking it up on Deku Deals. One, what platform you played on? Because I also looked. It's available on literally every platform. It's like, what's it? Android, iOS, PC, Switch, PS4, PS5, Stadia, Xbox One, Xbox Series. So it's available on every platform. What do you pretty much? What do you play it on?
Yeah, I primarily play it on my Xbox. It's on Game Pass, so you have Game Pass. Check it out, and I've just stuck with it for that reason. And I also own it on PC. That way I can take advantage of the betas they often run in order to test out new mechanics or characters.
Yeah, it looks like it's $8 on Steam right now. I looked it up.
Holy crap!
On Deku Deals. So it's
if you liked any of those games, any of those asymmetric games in Nintendo Land, like Luigi's Ghost Mansion, Mario Chase, or the Animal Crossing Sweet Candy one or whatever, check out Dead by Daylight. It's a little bit more extreme, obviously being horror themed. But if you have fun with those, you may have fun with Dead by Daylight for the same reason, especially at $8. That's really good. I
was also looking up, I just searched Dead by Daylight, and it is crazy how many collaborations they've done. Like I see Resident Evil, Ash, Evil Dead, Saw, Silent Hill, Nightmare on Elm Street. This one's great. Nicolas Cage.
Nicolas freaking Cage is in the game as
Halloween,
Nicolas Cage.
Alien, Ghostface, this is
Resident Evil,
Castlevania. Yeah, this is nuts. Alan Wake. There's a Tomb Raider.
Tomb Raider's there. Five Nights at Freddy's is coming in the near future.
Chucky. It's crazy. There's so many of these. I don't even know what you call them. Courses or expansions or DLC or whatever.
Collaborations, I guess. Yeah.
So can you play against Nicolas Cage even if you don't own the chapter pack?
Yeah, that's correct. So, I mean, I think it's somewhere how Nintendo. Actually, I forget. Nintendo's been all over the place. But yeah, basically, if you don't purchase the pack, you will still interact with those characters and realms or worlds in the game because it's online and everyone has equal access to that. You just can't play them as
Nicolas Cage. And I'm going to spend the $5 to play as Nicolas Cage in the game because
it's worth it. He is hilarious.
What does he do? I'm just trying to look at it.
He just yells a lot. He says weird things. It's so funny because with more recent survivors, they've started adding commentary to them. The older survivors, sadly, were from a time before the game had a real budget, so they didn't really talk much at all. But Nicolas Cage, went all in on the talking. He comments on everything. He's got some really funny one-liners in there that is just hilarious. And kind of almost breaks the fourth wall of the game to a degree. It works really well though. It's a lot of fun, and
I'm sold.
It's basically the Smash Brothers of horror games, and that's what's so fun about it.
What's crazy is I looked up the developer Behavior Interactive. I don't know if you've ever looked at their backlog of what they've made, but they have made a lot of games, and they were mostly, I don't want to say bad, but they're mostly the same.
Right.
Smurf Racer, Monster Inc. Scream Team, Ice Age, Scooby-Doo Mystery Mayhem, Home on the Range, Ed, Ed and Eddie, The Misadventures, just a bunch of DS. I don't want to say shovelware, but DS games that were trying to capitalize on, just sell anything. And it seems like a lot of that until, I mean, I guess they worked on Halo Wars Definitive Edition, but it feels like a lot of that until Dead by Daylight.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, as far as I'm aware, I mean, Dead by Daylight was their breakout hit, and it's the game that they've been largely focused on for the last, almost decade at this point. I think their
2016
anniversary is coming up. Yeah. So and it's still, as far as I'm aware, just about as strong as ever. Which is super exciting, and I think even if I'm wrong now, I won't be wrong when Five Nights at Freddy's launches, which is going to be a massive thing. I'm sure it's going to bring in a ton of people.
Yeah.
Cool so I find. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it's cool that they were able to carve out like their own space, right? Like I think that a lot of studios, a lot of developers, a lot of artists are struggling with, like, how do you compete with Fortnite? How do you compete with Roblox? Like, how do you compete with these massive games that are just continuing to grow and like take people's money and take up space in the industry? It's nice that a smaller studio, 505 Games isn't super small as a publisher, but like, it's nice that they were able to carve out their own space there. I think that's cool.
No, 1,000%. I think you kind of hit on something there. Like, Fortnite, is popular partially. I mean, it's a fun game, of course, the big part of it, but also all the crazy crossovers they have. Nothing's really off limits. You can play as many of the characters in Dead by Daylight in Fortnite as well. But but I think Fortnite, like, how many times can you really do that, right? I don't think there's a lot of space for another Fortnite like with a bunch of crossovers. Fortnite had the first mover advantage on it, but Dead by Daylight figured out, an adjacent way of doing it, where it's like, oh, well, let's focus on like one genre type, being horror in this case, and that gave them access to a whole ton of characters, of course, still within that space, both movies and gaming, and actor wise too. I guess Nicolas Cage, randomly, and that's really cool. Like, it's neat to see there being. For as great as Fortnite is, there's almost no cohesion to it, right? Yeah. It's like, you can play chaos, and that's part of the fun. But Dead by Daylight, you have that horror theme running all the way through, so it does feel more cohesive, and that almost makes it feel more impactful, because it doesn't feel as random. Mm-hmm. And it's also, just fun too, because every time as a Survivor, at least I'm a Survivor main, by the way. I prefer Survivor. Killer's way too stressful for me, which is funny. Do you think Killer would be the more more relaxed role? But it's not. But as Survivor, like, when you start a match, you don't even know who you're up against. Like, it could be any of these 30 plus characters. Yeah, it could be the alien, it could be, so
you don't know what skills they have until they reveal themselves.
Which is another exactly. Well, and even to that point, there's in the game, there's a thing called perks. Survivors and killers have access to their own unique slate of perks, and these are for, I'm sure other games have other things you call, that they call them. You can think of them as like badges from Paper Mario. So you have 4 of them you can equip at a time. There's hundreds of them, and they each do different things. They give you different benefits. And the thing is, the other side that you're playing against, they have no idea what you have equipped until they suss it out eventually from the gameplay. How the gameplay goes. Like, if they see you behaving in a way, they may be able to figure out, like, oh, he's got this equipped, right? Mm-hmm. And that adds another layer to the game, and not just, the unknown, but also how you can customize it to your play style, and also how every match feels different, because there's, infinite combinations of this stuff. And it really feels like, every match really plays out differently. And that's why I found it just so addictive, especially early on, still now, maybe to a lesser degree, thankfully, because I'm like, this can only intrude on my workday so much, and it just, I just love that you never quite know what you're getting into with every match.
Yeah, I'm sold. $8 on Steam is like, it's hard to say no to that. It's pretty cheap.
If you hop on, let me know. We'll play together. It'll be a lot of fun. I'll show you the ropes. So.
Yeah, my PC gaming rig died. I don't know if it's compatible. Like, I'm running on a Mac Pro, like an M1 Pro. I don't know if it runs on Mac, but I'll take a look.
Yeah, that's a good one. That
is it crossplay too?
It is. They just recently added that, so now your save carries across every platform.
And is it? It's like, if I play on PS5, I can play against you on something else.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So it's a fully online play. Yeah, you can play against anyone on any platform, but then your save files also carry over to any other platform as well. I think Switch is the only one with a weird exception where DLC brought another platform doesn't carry over, or vice versa. Yeah.
No surprise there.
And also, Switch version, as far as I'm aware, technically playable, not the best version by far. Yeah. But I assume with Switch 2, it will probably be at parity with the other platforms. So.
I'll let you know when I jump in. I think I'll pick it up. You've convinced me.
It's funny, real quick. One of the final point I was going to touch on, because I was talking about the game feel of 099, and that's another part of this that I love too, is just that game feel, because especially with the horror theme, like I mentioned, it's kind of like a race against time, that it gives you that constant risk versus reward analysis. Like, do I want to stay on this generator to start it up so I can eventually exit? But I'm a sitting duck here. I can't like the killer could be coming at any moment. And it's kind of a risk, like of how long to wait it out, how long to keep working on the generator before you finally run off and you see the killer possibly approaching. Because anytime you're not working on the generator, you're wasting time. But then it's also keeping you alive.
Yeah.
See that constant, again, risk versus reward. That's a lot of fun.
I think we found what works for you. Risk versus reward.
That
right?
really is
99 Dead by Daylight.
I think it's like the whole, like I said, the Sakurai game essence thing, which he talks about on his YouTube channel constantly, although less so now because he's done with it, sadly, because he's making a new game. But that makes me excited for the new Sakurai game, hoping, like with all this talk of game essence, I want to see what his next game is. Like, with his... I wouldn't be surprised if he even realized things about himself in making those videos, right? And now that he's really done all this analysis on his own history, it's like, wow, what's that next Sakurai game going to be? And another tangent.
No, don't be sorry. I love tangents.
I realize I'm probably in the minority on this. I'm fine with no more Sakurai Smash Brothers. Not that I don't want Smash Brothers. I just want someone else to take it over because I want to see what Sakurai can do in another space. Like Smash Brothers is figured out. Like we know what that series is. I think that could be carried on by someone else without much trouble. I want to see what Sakurai can do with a whole new game. It's been a long time since we've had a truly new Sakurai game. I think the last was Kid Icarus Uprising, which was well over 10 years ago now. So give us something new, Sakurai, please. I want to see what your game essence is in a new form.
I want him to oversee porting Uprising to the Switch 2 because it's got the mouse, and I think the mouse will enable that. Right? I want to see him. I want to see him like he's like an executive producer. He's just overseeing, but he's also working on something brand new. And I agree. I think maybe we are the minority, but like. I don't know that he needs to continue Smash, and I don't know what else they would do with Smash. I mean, I guess introduce more characters and stuff, or more fighters. But I don't know. I think that someone else can take over that. I would love to see something fresh from him.
Exactly. My concern is that Sakurai feels like he needs to be there, whether or not he wants to be. And maybe he does. I don't know. I mean, obviously, I want Sakurai to do whatever he wants to do. And if that's making Smash Brothers until the end of time, hey, that's totally fine. But, for me, selfishly, I hope his own desires aligns with my wants of seeing what else he can do. Because, again, we've had what, 5, 6 Smashes now at this point, depending how you count them. And, I think it just keeps getting more and more refined, which is fine. But I feel like I know what Smash is. I want something else now, from Sakurai.
Yeah, do you think he would ever work on a nice little transition here, a new 3D Mario game?
Oh my God, that would be something, wouldn't it? I don't think so. I feel like I almost wonder if he would find that too constraining.
You think so? Like Nintendo's too like controlling about Mario.
Maybe. I mean, it might be that more kind of, as I was speaking to a degree earlier, like, there's that baseline Mario that's consistent across the games. And not that you can't do a lot more with that concept, as Nintendo has themselves, as I commented on. But I wonder if he might feel too locked down by it. But obviously, I have no insight into Sakurai myself. I think it'd be interesting. I would personally love to see what he does with a Mario game. But I don't think we've ever really seen much attachment to Mario from him outside of Smash. So I'm not expecting it. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I think it'd be fun to see him. I mean, Mario again. I think that'd be fun. But also, if he went back to Kirby too, his original creation, and see what else he can do. Honestly, one of my favorite Kirby I just gave it away. One of my favorite Kirby games is Kirby Air Ride, especially the city trial mode, which he's touched on in his own videos as well. And I would love to see him evolve that idea, if not on Kirby, maybe with a different IP or a whole new IP. Seeing him do like another kind of like maybe broader multiplayer game could be a lot of fun. I think
he's so talented, and there's an off the wall idea. This is totally unrelated, and my turn for a tangent. I would maybe not a tangent, but I would love to see him either work on a brand new IP that nobody's ever heard of. It's totally new creation, or Star Fox. Like, can he revive Star Fox?
Oh,
can he bring it back?
Because Kid Icarus Uprising had that DNA already, right?
Yeah, and so it's like I feel like they've struggled to bring back Star Fox. It's like we don't need another Star Fox 64. They don't need to bring Star Fox 64 again. Like, I would love.
Right.
I think the Star Fox games on Wii U are underrated or overhated. I think like people were really harsh.
Oh, Star Fox
Zero, and what was the like mini game Adventure? No, not Adventure.
Guard. God, this is the security camera ones that we're talking about.
Yeah,
Guard. That's it. Yeah,
I liked both of them. I mean, I think like the main game was pretty good. But I would love to see like Sakurai's influence and his spirit and like how his art, his artistry, and like I would love to see him revive that, either a new IP or like take a current IP that needs some help and like bring it up to the Smash Bros level would be sweet.
That'd be really interesting. Yeah, I mean, especially with, I feel like with Star Fox, almost like, I mean, I have no idea how Nintendo's going to operate with this thing, but I almost feel like they're not locked to any single vision for that series at this point. I don't think they can be, because I don't think Nintendo even fully knows the Star Fox is at this point. So I would love to see Sakurai's take, like do something bold with the series, right? And especially with Kid Icarus itself having both the air and on ground segments. Star Fox has as well, and that gives Sakurai at least two realms in which to play with if he doesn't invent a whole new way of playing. And yeah, I think that'd be fun. That'd be exciting.
I think we're a couple years out, unfortunately, from Sakurai game, but I don't know. We'll see. It's always a surprise. So,
although he did say, I mean, you're probably right, but he did say, God, what was
one of his videos
when he was, he started working on his next game like a couple years ago. I think he basically gave a specific time, so it may not be as far away as we think. Hopefully, Switch 2 launch, maybe, probably not. But
I wonder if he's
cool.
he's not working on Okami, right? Like he's not a Nintendo employee, right? He's a contractor. He like does contracts.
Correct. Stuff. Yeah, he runs his own company, and I believe often it's just him, and he hires staff when he needs to, or rather brings on a development studio like Bandai Namco.
But I saw him hanging out with Kamiya. Is that his name? Kamiya?
Yeah, that's right. I saw him,
like a picture. He was hanging out with him, and then like right after that, or like a week after that, they announced Okami 2.
That'd be a crazy pairing. Nuts. I feel like if they were officially working together, I feel like they would probably announce that already. But it would be awesome to see some kind of collaboration between those two. Officially, I can't imagine what that would be. So, but if Sakurai if they have any influence into each other's games, that could be really interesting too, even if it's unofficial.
Well, we talked a bunch about a new 3D Mario game, sort of out of order. Not that it matters, but anything else you have to say about like a new 3D Mario game? Do you think we're going to see it at Switch 2 launch window or launch title, or is it a little ways out?
Yeah, so I think for one, we'll absolutely be seeing it on April 2nd. I think whether it's a short clip or a longer look at it, or a trailer, I'm certain we're going to see the next 3D Mario. Nintendo almost always shows off that. It's funny that they used to be the premier launch titles, but now they hold them off until a little bit later. But I think it will be shown there. I'm not expecting it to be a launch title, because I'm personally thinking it'll be Mario Kart 9 or whatever the new one is, 10, whatever it is, because they've shown it first, and it's basically the biggest IP Nintendo has. Like if you want to sell Switch 2s forever, get Mario Kart out as soon as possible. And going with that logic, I don't think it makes sense to launch a new 3D Mario alongside it. I think they may possibly compete with each other. So what I'm personally expecting is they'll show it off April 2nd. They'll have it act as, and I assume the Switch 2 launch would happen a few months after that. But then 3D Mario could possibly come as soon as the holiday season of this year and act as basically a second launch for the platform. I do think it's possible that it doesn't come out this first year. It could come out sometime next year, kind of like Mario Sunshine on the GameCube. But I think we've seen them kind of emulate the Switch 1 launch strategy as much as they can so far. And granted, things can always change, and it's not a perfect comparison. Obviously, there's probably not going to be a Zelda this time, or a new 3D Zelda at least. But I think following that paradigm of having Mario at the holidays, it worked out so well the first time. Why not do it again? And that way you have Mario Kart selling it all the while before it.
I was looking up what EPD has been working on, and that's the Nintendo Entertainment Planning and Development team, and they've got like a ton of divisions inside of that. But it looks like they've been working on a bunch. A lot of stuff they've co-developed, like Emio. I loved Emio. That was great. Pikmin 4 they co-developed. Metroid Dread, Bowser's Fury, Super Mario 3D All-Stars, Pikmin 3 Deluxe. Like they've been co-developing a ton. But the games they've developed themselves is like ARMS, Super Mario Odyssey, Super Mario Maker 2, Mario Kart Tour, Ring Fit Adventure, Splatoon 3, Tears of the Kingdom. So and I think that I don't know. I'm excited to see what this group comes up with, because they just release banger after banger, except Mario 1-2 Switch, or everybody 1-2 Switch.
Mario 1-2 Switch, that'd be interesting. Yeah, no, they are an amazing studio, and going back as far as I think their first official game was Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, I believe, on the GameCube, which was freaking wild. I think that was when they were known as Tokyo EAD.
Yeah, that was
yeah.
It looks like Excite Bike maybe was the first one that EAD did, but who knows if Wikipedia is correct. I trust Wikipedia like sometimes.
With the NES. Actually, yeah. So I guess sorry, it's a little confusing. I think, and I'm not even fully on myself. Yeah, there's always been EAD, but then they had the spin-off studio in Tokyo, I believe, which went on to make like the 3D, most of the recent 3D Mario's, like Galaxy and Odyssey, and that started with Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. But yeah, I mean, it was built on, of course, a foundation before that. I'm sure sharing many of the same members. Yeah. So
it's crazy,
and I think it is crazy, and yeah, I'm just excited for whatever they do. Like if it's a 3D Mario or a 3D Donkey Kong or something else, I can't wait because they almost always produce bangers. Honestly, the only 3D Mario I haven't loved from them, not to say it's not a good game still, is just Super Mario 3D World. It just felt so conventional, I suppose. Like it felt like a 2D game in a quasi 3D space, but not like fully.
And then they
3D.
threw Bowser's Fury in there, which is insane. Which is like what the whole game should have been, maybe.
That's exactly it, right? Because that took the mechanics of the 2D games, the power-up system and all that, put it into 3D, and like that feels great. And that's why I'm kind of hoping that they iterate on for the next 3D Mario. Because the one thing that we haven't seen outside of 3D World and Bowser's Fury is really like having proper power-ups in a true 3D Mario, like 64, Sunshine, or Odyssey. And I think that'd be really cool if you actually did have those power-ups that, you can change how you play through any given area, including, expanding it to give us proper flight again, which I know can introduce issues because you could just reach an area where you're not supposed to yet. But I would love if they, just gave us that kind of like freedom again, which we haven't really had again outside of Bowser's Fury, because otherwise all the power-ups are like locked to specific areas, either from a block or a character you capture, And I kind of want that freedom again. But hey, again, I'm open to anything they give us, whether it's Galaxy 3, Odyssey 2, something entirely new. Like here's one small idea, largely based on the Mario movie, because I just love that movie so much, is like if they had like New York act as like a hub, Brooklyn act as a hub, and you went into the sewers to access like, different open worlds from Mario, awesome. And like you kind of marry the real world with the Mario world as you know it, and you can even go to as far as like maybe having the climax being in Brooklyn again, like in the movie, like something like that could be fun in a fun way to tie into the Mario movie 2, for instance, which is coming up.
Yeah, it sounds like a Mario 64 sort of thing where you've got a base world and you're jumping into picture frames, but you're just like jumping down pipes and coming out in a different world. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I kind of miss the hub worlds. Like Mario Odyssey didn't really have one. It basically had a world map, and Galaxy 2 was similar as well. We haven't had really a true hub since the first Mario Galaxy, so I kind of want to return to that if they don't go full open world, in which case you wouldn't need a hub. So
awesome. Well, any other games you want to plug? I saw that. Not to steal your answer here, but I don't know if you've seen Samurai Pizza Cat's Blast from the Past.
Oh,
it looks nuts, and it's all hand drawn.
I'm excited for this. This is probably perhaps the most shocking announcements I've ever seen, because I never expected this to come back. So for anyone who doesn't know, Samurai Pizza Cats is a show from I think 1991, even earlier in Japan. It was an anime. It was brought over to the US. I watched as a kid. I fell in love with it instantly without even knowing the full history of it, because the movie or the show is just so kind of like weird and unconventional and fourth wall breaking constantly. It's just a lot of fun. And later on I learned that that's because the team tasked with translating or localizing the show, they apparently, I forget the exact details, but the essence is they didn't have the actual scripts. Like they didn't get translator or whatever, so they had nothing to work off of. So they made it all up. They completely made everything up in the show, which is hilarious. And it's one of the few animes, as far as I'm aware, that like people, it's widely considered to be the better version of it. Like most people are like, you gotta watch the original, right? Like the translation or localization screws something up. Most people are like, no, this is actually better, because it's just funnier, it's great. And I don't know if we fully know yet like how this game is working, whether it's based on the true Japanese version of being localized, or if it's like being built with localization in mind. I don't know if it even matters, because if you want to stay really true to the essence of the original show, make it in Japan first, then localize it here, right? In any case, I did not expect this. The fact that they have the original voice actors back for almost everyone, from what I could tell, sounding identical 30 years later, that's awesome. Yeah. That's so wild. And the fact, then it looks like it could be just a fun game to play. We didn't see much of the gameplay, so it's hard to say for sure. But whether or not that game ends up being bad or not, I hope it doesn't. I'm excited.
Well, it's beautiful.
Like I never expected this.
And it's hand drawn. I saw that it's hand drawn, which is, it's like they're doing what they did originally when the anime was originally created. Is like it's all hand drawn and the backgrounds are all painted and everything. And it looks awesome. I can't wait. I don't know when it's releasing, but right now it's announced for Steam. I'm on the Deku Deals page. It looks like Steam right now. I'm not sure what other platforms it's.
I think they also said all major platforms. I believe they didn't specify, but I believe that's what they said. And to your point, the look, it actually reminded me a lot of Cuphead, like with that kind of like intentional throwback style, which is perfect. I love that. Like, I want more games to look like that. You know, I was just playing Wario Land 4 recently on the Switch, thanks to Switch Online, where it got added, and I'm like, man, I kind of miss when games look like this. Now, obviously, I know there's no like shortage of indie games that look like that, but there's still like a general level of polish, a consistent level of polish you get with like games made by with the budgets of a AA or AAA game, but we don't get that art style anymore from them. And man, I'm like, I wish, like, I kind of miss this.
No, it looks great. Any other games you want to plug before we wrap things up? Anything you been thinking about or excited about?
Yeah, God, I actually took a couple of notes here, and I don't know where there they are. Okay, so. A couple things. So I'm late to the bandwagon on this, much as I was with Dead by Daylight by 5 years. Not as bad in this case, but I recently got into Vampire Survivors.
Vampire Survivors is amazing.
I had no idea. Actually, I should have. I had a barista in Seattle before I moved away a few months ago. They would tell me about this game constantly. Like, you gotta play Vampire Survivors. It's so good. And like, I looked up a gameplay video. I'm like, that's it? Like, it's just like 8-bit visuals at best with granted a ton of enemies, and they're like, there's no buttons, you just move around. And I'm a fool. Obviously, it's one he was talking about F-099 that looks like a 16-bit game. I should have known better. This game's so fun. Like, there is so much gameplay to it despite the seeming simplicity, and I'm addicted, and I still suck at the game. My best run so far I think is 15 minutes. I only finally broke through that 11.5-minute barrier where all the skeletons show up, I think.
It's great.
And it's just it's so fun. Like, that's another great like gameplay essence, a good game feel.
I love that it feels like it doesn't teach you anything, doesn't tell you how to like play the game, and you just sort of figure it out.
Figure it out.
It's great.
Which is
and it's $5
tangent. Too. Sorry. I hate tutorials in games. At least tutorials that feel like tutorials. If you're slowing down the game, you're popping up text boxes that I can't easily skip, and I just don't want to play your game. I just don't want to do it. And the fact that this game didn't depend on them was great, because I don't like having my gameplay interfered with, and this game does none of that. And it's fun, just to figure out like how each power works and what upgrading them does, and the best way how these powers complement each other, like that's to me fun. I enjoy that. It's almost like solving a puzzle, like how do I get better at this game using these limited resources and how they interact with each other.
And it's only $5, and it looks like it regularly goes on sale for $4. But man, it's solid. It's super addicting. Like, I think I've got like 50 hours in it on Steam Deck, because you sit down and you're like, oh, I'll just play around it, and you're like, 3 hours later, you're like, oh shit, I've been playing too much Vampire Survivors. Plus, there's some cool DLC. I haven't played the Ode to Castlevania, or I did a little bit. But there's Ode to Castlevania, Emergency Meeting, which is Among Us, I think. There's just like Operation Guns, where I think that's Contra. A Contra crossover.
Yeah, I didn't know about these, so I gotta
there's
catch
some
up.
cool crossover and some cool DLC, so I think you'll be into it.
See, maybe it's just a horror game crossover thing I'm into, like Dead by Daylight, Vampire Survivors.
I love when people come on the show and they like realize something about themselves, like, oh my gosh, I like this mechanic of this type of game.
I'm gonna leave this podcast a whole different person.
Oh man, so Vampire Survivors is great.
Yeah, super fun game. Check it out. As Andrew was saying, it's really cheap, but it's also free on Game Pass. If you have
Game Pass, everything's free on Game Pass. I feel like it's nuts.
It's pretty great if you have it. Yeah. Another game though, it's not out yet, but I played the demo, and it's a game I'm really excited for. And I talk about it so much. I just want to make it clear, like, I have not been paid by these guys at all. I'm just championing this game as a fan, as clearly a big fan of 3D platformers. Ruffy and the Riverside. This is have you heard about this game, Andrew, at all?
It's like a flat character in a 3D space.
Yeah, like Paper Mario style. Yeah, it's you play as like billboard type characters. They're hand drawn. Again, like kind of Samurai Pizza Cats, which looks lovely. And it's a 3D platformer in the style of like Mario 64 or Banjo-Kazooie, but with a really fun twist. Because what you do in this game is you can copy elements or textures really from like one thing and apply it to another. So for instance, if you grab a lava texture and apply it to water, it'll just burn anything in the water, or if you want to climb a wall, copy a vine texture, paste it onto the wall. You can climb right up to that wall, or climb up the wall to the star you're collecting. And and this game has a level of it's kind of touched on it a few times, like how I love indie games. I love that they exist, but you don't always get the level of polish from them that you do with a double A or triple A game these days. This game feels pretty much almost as polished as a 3D platformer can get. And it takes me, while being like a throwback to the style of platformers that we've been talking about much today, like Mario 64, where you're exploring these kind of contained worlds. Although actually I'm not even sure how big this one is, because it's actually a pretty big world that's blocked off in the demo. But it's just really fun to go around, collect stars, use this new power to solve puzzles and make you think about the world in a whole new way, including to the degree of swapping the sun with the moon and turning day to night. It's crazy stuff that they're doing here. And the fact that it has this awesome 2D hand-painted art style in the 3D world is awesome. I freaking love it. So there's a free demo out now. Check
Steam,
it out.
Right? There's a demo on Steam.
Interested? It's on Steam, and it's coming. The full game, I believe, launches in April on every major platform. So I really can't wait for this game. I really like what I've played so far. I'm excited to play it.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So.
I love
it
the art
it
style.
So good.
It's amazing.
I would love for one, the Paper Mario kind of took some pages from this book. I like how Paper Mario looks, but I think if they went with a hand drawn look, it will look even better. Or as we're kind of touching on with Wario Land 4, I would love if Nintendo went with a kind of a more back to basics approach to themselves. I say back to basics is almost underselling it, because I know hand drawn takes a lot of work, possibly way more work than 3D models, which is why it doesn't get done these days. But I would love if we saw a game from Nintendo in this style. We had Wario Land Shake It on the Wii, all hand drawn, looked amazing, and we've never seen anything like that again from Nintendo. So I would love to see more of that. It
feels like indie devs experiment and do stuff like this. I would love to see something experimental from Nintendo, or more experimental feeling from Nintendo.
That's 100% it. I honestly, and I realize I'm probably in the minority on this, for the second half of the Switch's lifespan, I feel like Nintendo's almost been playing it a little too safe. A lot of remasters, remakes, a lot of games in the same vein that we've seen before, especially when compared to the first half of the Switch, which did feel more experimental. We had Mario Odyssey, which had a crazy bias snatching concept. Despite being creepy, it was really cool. Open World Breath of the Wild, a whole new IP in the form of ARMS, which is kind of crazy. A whole new fitness game in the form of Ring Fit. And I feel like we've kind of lost that. So I'm hoping that part of that is because they've just been busy making those games for Switch too. And I'm really hoping we see that level of experimentation and innovation again with the Switch 2 reveal, because I kind of need it.
I like that they've greenlit, they've released some things, or like I said, greenlit some, like Emio. Emio is not playing it safe, but it's I don't know, they've sold 150 million consoles. They're like, go ahead and do Emio, do the third game for this, or another Code Recollection. Nobody's asking for this, and it's maybe not as good as it was on the DS, but let's bring it over. And they're green lighting some random stuff, but they're not really experimenting. It doesn't feel like in this second half of the Switch's life.
That's a good point. Emio is an interesting example, because it's a throwback to the NES Famicom detective game. Detective Club. I forget what it's called exactly. But that inherently kind of makes it feel pretty unique by today's standards. So that's cool. Emio personally doesn't appeal to me, but I do like that they experimented with that. But as you were saying, I kind of hope that they take that idea, but broaden it.
And also with a major IP. Do something crazy with a major IP would be really, really cool.
Exactly. That'd be really neat. Even honestly, even Tears of the Kingdom, play it way too safe for me. I thought they were going to be bolder with that sequel, and it just didn't hit for me in the same way that it seemed to for some people. At least I'm happy for them, but it definitely hit in the same way that Breath of the Wild did. And for me, and I hope that the next game
it felt like a really big expansion. Just felt like a big expansion, which was great. It was more, give me more Breath of the Wild, which is fine, but it didn't feel like brand new. So
it's interesting, and I know we keep going on these tangents, but. One of the common complaints before Tears of the Kingdom launched was that it feels like DLC, or it looks like DLC, or $70 DLC was the price, or the statement. And at the time, I I pushed against that because I felt like it wasn't a fair assessment, having not fully played the game. Like, you know, it looks like a complete game. But I think I almost think there's two different ways of taking it. Like, obviously there's the disparaging way, like this is way overpriced for what it should be. But I think more that, to kind of your point, it feels like the $70 version of DLC, right? Like, it's an ambitious form of DLC, but it still feels like it's very much constrained to what Breath of the Wild was. And, you know, especially with it being literally in the same world with two other areas kind of tacked on, in my opinion, that I didn't quite love. It just felt weird, you know, and it didn't just do it for me. So if for those who did, it was awesome. I think the Ultra Hand Mechanic, brilliant. I just don't think it was the best fit for a Zelda game. I think that's what I wanted Nintendo to experiment with. Like, make a whole new game based around the Ultra Hand Mechanic. Like, that's what I want to see.
Something crazy.
It feels like it was like, it was kind of like holding Zelda. I think Zelda was actually holding that back from what it could have been.
That's a good point. Yeah, and maybe they've got the technology now and they've built it basically, so maybe they'll do something else with it. I don't know, but you also mentioned the $70 price tag, and I think that Nintendo recently updated like one of their support pages to say that the vouchers, the Switch vouchers, are not going to be valid for Switch 2 games. And I just think everybody needs to be prepared for Switch 2 games are going to be $70. I think that's a very clear indicator.
1,000%. Tears of the Kingdom was an experiment. It was a huge success, obviously selling extremely well. I am convinced that every major Switch 2 exclusive, at least from Nintendo, probably third parties too, but at least from Nintendo, is going to be $70. Minus, you know, maybe smaller scale or remasters like we've seen on Switch to a degree. But most games that are exclusive, I think, will be 70.
Plug here, don't pay full prices for games. Just add it to your wish list on DekuDeals.com, and you can get notified when a game goes on sale.
Well done.
Well, Andre, man, thank you so much for joining me. I love these tangents. We got to get you back on. We got to talk about video game movies too. So we're going to do a special episode. But in the meantime, how can folks find you?
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me. It's been a total blast talking about things I'm passionate about, and that includes where people can find me at being GameXplain. It's a YouTube channel that covers, I used to say all things gaming. We're very much, especially now, focused on things I'm passionate about, which largely is Nintendo. So go there for like analysis videos or my thoughts or just weird videos on things or deep dives and other things. It's just kind of all over the place in terms of Nintendo. Especially now with us reaching our 15th anniversary, I'm kind of like, I have some fun ideas for the direction of the channel. So stay tuned for that. So you can follow GameXplain at, on YouTube, TikTok, X, and Bluesky, all at that handle. And myself personally at André Segers on X or Bluesky.
And I'll put everything in the notes, so easy to follow you. Thanks again, Andre. Man, we talked about a lot of good games. So many good games.
We did.
If you're listening, you can find these games and more on DekuDeals.com. You can create a collection, add to your wish list, get notified when games go on sale, or just find games you're interested in playing. Thanks again for joining me, and hope to talk to you again soon.
You too. Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Talk a Good Game. This show is produced by me, Andrew Wolf, in Seattle, Washington, with music by Plus Minus One and art by Sonny Ross. Find more good games, create a wish list, and build your video game collection on DekuDeals.com. DekuDeals Patreon supporters experience the site and mobile app ad-free. Join now at patreon.com/DekuDeals. The best way to support TAGG is by leaving a review, and you can suggest a game to be featured on a future episode by sending an email to tagg@DekuDeals.com.